They say beauty is only skin deep, but these criminals proved that a chiseled jawline doesn't guarantee a clean conscience. You're about to see why hot felon became a trending topic. Number 1. Jeremy Meeks. In 2014, the Stockton Police Department posted a routine mugshot to Facebook. Within hours, the internet lost its collective mind. Jeremy Meeks, arrested on weapons charges, had piercing blue eyes, perfect bone structure, and a face that launched 1,000 thirsty comments. Hot felon trended worldwide, and suddenly everyone was questioning their taste in men. His mugshot got over 90,000 likes and comments like, "Is it illegal to be that handsome?" Meeks served 2 years, but unlike most ex-cons, he walked out into a modeling contract. From prison yard to fashion yard, Jeremy Meeks proved that sometimes crime does pay, just not the way you'd expect. Number 2. Meki Alante Lucky. In 2016, Meki Alante Lucky was arrested in North Carolina for speeding and driving a stolen vehicle. His mugshot should have been just another entry in the system. Instead, it broke the internet. Why? Lucky has heterochromia, a rare genetic condition that gave him one piercing blue eye and one brown eye. Combined with his perfect jawline and model-level bone structure, his mugshot looked less like a police booking and more like a magazine cover. Twitter dubbed him Prison Bae, and within weeks his photo had millions of views. St. Clair Modeling in Atlanta saw the potential and signed him immediately. By 2017, Lucky was walking in New York Fashion Week, proving once again that the right mugshot can launch a modeling career faster than any agency submission. Number 3. Cameron Herron. In 2018, 18-year-old Cameron Herron was street racing his Ford Mustang in Tampa, Florida, when he struck and killed a 24-year-old mother and her 21-month-old daughter. It was a horrific, senseless tragedy caused by reckless driving. But when his mugshot and court appearances went viral, something disturbing happened. He gained a massive fan base, primarily young women on TikTok. Hashtags like "Justice for Cameron" trended worldwide, with fans calling him too handsome for prison and begging for his release. His boyish good looks, styled hair, and tailored courtroom suits made him look more like a teen actor than someone convicted of vehicular manslaughter. He was sentenced to 24 years in prison in 2021. But his supporters continue to flood social media with edits and pleas for mercy. Number 4. Wade Wilson. Wade Wilson isn't the Deadpool character, but he shares the name, and somehow that made his 2024 murder trial even more surreal. The Florida man was convicted of killing 2 women in 2019, strangling one and running over the other multiple times. But during his trial, his heavily tattooed face, muscular build, and intense stare attracted a disturbing level of female attention. Women showed up to his court hearings like it was a concert. Some wore Team Wade shirts. Others sent him love letters and money for his commissary account. He was sentenced to death in 2024, but not before becoming another example of hot criminal hysteria gone too far. Number 5. Tyler Hadley. Tyler Hadley was a 17-year-old from Port St. Lucie, Florida, who looked like any other suburban teenager. Decent-looking, popular enough, and desperate to throw an epic party. There was just one problem. His parents were home and had recently grounded him for drinking and drug use. So, on July 16, 2011, Tyler did the unthinkable. He bludgeoned both his parents to death with a hammer, spent 3 hours cleaning up the blood, then posted on Facebook "Party at my house." Between 40 and 60 teenagers showed up that night, drinking and partying while Blake and Mary Jo Hadley's bodies lay in the master bedroom under furniture and blankets. Tyler Hadley pleaded no contest to 2 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He's currently serving his time in Florida, where fellow inmates say he signs autographs and calls himself Hammer Boy. His case isn't about being attractive, it's about being a sociopath who threw a party on his parents' graves. Literally. Number 6. Sean Corey. In 2010, Sean Corey was arrested on methamphetamine charges in Stockton, California. His mugshot went viral not because he looked rough, but because he looked like an Abercrombie model who got lost on the way to a photo shoot. Chiseled jaw, perfect hair, intense eyes. People couldn't believe this was a meth arrest. The internet did what it does best, made him a meme and a heartthrob simultaneously. Unlike Jeremy Meeks, Corey didn't parlay his mugshot fame into a career, but he did become an early example of the hot criminal phenomenon. His mugshot still circulates online as proof that good genes don't equal good choices. Number 7. Oscar Pistorius. Oscar Pistorius wasn't a career criminal. He was a Paralympic superstar, the Blade Runner who competed in the Olympics on prosthetic legs and inspired millions. Handsome, athletic, and charismatic, he was South Africa's golden boy, until Valentine's Day 2013, when he shot and killed his girlfriend Riva Steenkamp through a bathroom door at his home. Pistorius claimed he thought she was an intruder, but prosecutors argued it was murder after a domestic dispute. His trial became a global spectacle, with his good looks and emotional breakdowns in court dominating headlines. He was convicted of culpable homicide, later upgraded to murder, and sentenced to 13 years and 5 months. He was released from prison in 2024. Number 8. Eric Menendez. While both Menendez brothers were good-looking, Eric had a boyish charm that made him particularly fascinating to the public. During the trials in the 1990s, both brothers had fan clubs and received marriage proposals. Eric's sensitive demeanor and testimony about abuse made some people sympathetic to him, despite the brutal nature of the crimes. He's been in prison since 1996, married twice behind bars, and recently became the subject of renewed interest thanks to true crime documentaries. Eric Menendez represents the complicated intersection of good looks, privilege, abuse claims, and murder. Number 9. Paul Bernardo. Paul Bernardo was handsome, charming, well-dressed, and utterly terrifying. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, this good-looking accountant from Scarborough, Ontario, became Canada's most notorious serial killer. With his feathered blonde hair, soft features, and dimples, he looked like a soap opera star. But behind that wholesome facade was a monster who raped at least 13 women, and with his equally attractive wife, Karla Homolka, murdered 3 teenage girls, including Karla's own 15-year-old sister. The couple videotaped their crimes, creating horrifying evidence that shocked even hardened investigators. They looked like the perfect couple, attractive professionals living in a nice neighborhood with lots of friends. That's why the media dubbed them the Ken and Barbie killers. Their looks made the depravity even more shocking. How could 2 people who looked so normal be capable of such evil? Number 10. Billy the Kid. Long before mugshots went viral, there was Billy the Kid. The Wild West outlaw was a legend in his own time, known for his quick draw and even quicker smile. Photos from the 1800s show a young man with a boyish face and a slight grin, someone who looked more like a farmhand than a killer who allegedly murdered 21 men. Billy was charming, charismatic, and had a reputation with the ladies despite being on the run. He was shot dead at age 21 by Sheriff Pat Garrett, but his legend lived on. Books, movies, and TV shows have romanticized him for over a century. Billy the Kid proved that being a handsome outlaw is a fast track to immortality, even if the actual life is short and violent. Number 11. Jesse James. Jesse James wasn't just a bank robber, he was the bank robber. Leader of the James Younger gang, he became a folk hero in post-Civil War America. Tall, well-dressed, and polite to civilians while robbing trains and banks, Jesse had a reputation as a gentleman criminal. Women swooned. Newspapers wrote ballads about him. He was basically the 1800s version of a viral celebrity. He was shot in the back by a member of his own gang in 1882 at age 34, but his legend only grew. Jesse James became the template for every charming outlaw in American folklore. Handsome, dangerous, and ultimately tragic, he proved that crime might not pay, but it does make for great storytelling. Number 12. John Dillinger. During the Great Depression, John Dillinger robbed banks like it was a competitive sport. Charming, confident, and always impeccably dressed, he became America's most wanted man, and also one of its most admired. People loved him because he robbed banks, the institutions they blamed for their poverty. Women allegedly threw themselves at him. The press turned him into a celebrity. J. Edgar Hoover made him public enemy number 1, which only made him more famous. In 1934, federal agents shot him outside a Chicago theater. He was 31. John Dillinger's good looks made him a legend, but the FBI made sure the legend didn't get a sequel. Number 13. Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez terrorized California in the mid-1980s as the Night Stalker, breaking into homes and committing brutal crimes. During his trial, women showed up in droves, some wearing all black to match his aesthetic. One woman, Doreen Leoy, wrote him 75 letters and eventually married him in 1996 while he was on death row. She called him kind and funny, which is serial killer groupie logic at its finest. Ramirez died in 2013, but his case remains a disturbing example of how some people confuse danger with attraction. Number 14. Lucky Luciano. Charles Lucky Luciano was one of the most powerful mob bosses in American history, modernizing organized crime and essentially creating the modern mafia. But he was also known for his sharp style, slicked-back hair, and old-school movie star looks. Luciano didn't just run the underworld, he looked good doing it. He wore custom suits, frequented the best clubs, and had relationships with models and actresses. Even after his deportation to Italy in 1946, he lived a life of luxury. He died in 1962, but his legend as a handsome, ruthless innovator lives on. Number 15. Clyde Barrow. Clyde Barrow was one half of the infamous Bonnie and Clyde duo that robbed banks and killed lawmen across the South during the Great Depression. Photos show a slender young man with sharp features and a cocky smile. He wasn't traditionally handsome like a movie star, but he had charisma, danger, and a ride-or-die girlfriend, which is apparently a recipe for legend status. Bonnie and Clyde were gunned down in a police ambush in 1934, their car riddled with over 100 bullets. They were both in their mid-20s. Their story has been romanticized in movies and songs for decades, turning two violent criminals into tragic anti-heroes. Clyde's looks and his devotion to Bonnie made him one half of America's most iconic outlaw couple. Number 16. Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar was responsible for thousands of deaths as the head of the Medellin cartel, but photos from his younger years show a handsome man with a warm smile and kind eyes. That contrast between his appearance and his actions is part of what made him so fascinating and so terrifying. He looked like someone's friendly uncle, not one of history's most brutal drug lords. Escobar used his charm and resources to build a professional image in Colombia, funding schools and housing projects while simultaneously running a billion-dollar cocaine empire. He was killed by Colombian forces in 1993, but his story continues to captivate through documentaries and series like Narcos. His early photos remind us that monsters don't always look like monsters. Number 17. Colton Harris Moore. Colton Harris Moore wasn't a violent criminal, but he was definitely a criminal with style. Starting his crime spree as a teenager, he stole cars, boats, and even planes, often while barefoot. His boyish good looks and Robin Hood persona made him a folk hero to some, especially after he evaded authorities for 2 years while living in the wilderness. He became an internet sensation, with fan pages and t-shirts. Hollywood came calling, and his story was optioned for a movie. Harris Moore was eventually caught in the Bahamas in 2010 and sentenced to over 6 years in prison. He's since been released and tried to build a legitimate life. Turns out flying planes without a license is frowned upon, but being good-looking while doing it gets you a movie deal. Number 18. Robert Franklin Stroud. Robert Stroud, known as the Birdman of Alcatraz, was a convicted murderer who spent 54 years in prison. But photos from his younger days show a handsome man with intense eyes and strong features. He became famous for raising birds in prison and writing books about them, which softened his image from killer to eccentric genius. Burt Lancaster played him in a 1962 film, further romanticizing his story. But the real Stroud was a violent man who killed 2 people and spent most of his life in solitary confinement. His good looks and later intellectual pursuits created a legend that was far removed from reality. He died in prison in 1963, but Hollywood's version lives on. Number 19. Jeffrey Dahmer. Before Netflix made him a household name again with Monster, Jeffrey Dahmer was already one of history's most notorious serial killers. Between 1978 and 1991, he murdered 17 men and boys, often dismembering them and keeping body parts as trophies. But what disturbs people most isn't just what he did, it's that he looked so normal. Clean-cut, blonde, boy-next-door attractive in his younger photos, Dahmer didn't look like a monster. During his trial and imprisonment, Dahmer received countless love letters from women who found him attractive. Some proposed marriage, others sent money and photos. Even after his crimes were public knowledge, his looks and quiet demeanor made some people see him as misunderstood rather than monstrous. He was murdered in prison in 1994 by a fellow inmate, but his disturbing fan base persists online. Number 20. Bugsy Siegel. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel was a founding member of Murder, Inc. and the man who helped build modern Las Vegas. He was also devastatingly handsome, with movie star looks that made him a fixture in Hollywood circles. He dated actresses, wore expensive suits, and looked more like a leading man than a hitman. Siegel's good looks and charm helped him move in elite circles, but his violent temper and criminal activities eventually caught up with him. In 1947, he was shot and killed in Beverly Hills, likely on mob orders. Bugsy Siegel proved that even in the underworld, looks matter, and his legacy lives on in every casino on the Vegas Strip. Number 21. Christian Brando. Christian Brando had the misfortune of being Marlon Brando's son, which came with good looks, name recognition, and crushing expectations. In 1990, he shot and killed his half-sister Cheyenne's boyfriend at the family's Hollywood Hills home. He claimed it was an accident during a confrontation, but he pleaded guilty to manslaughter and served 5 years. Christian was handsome in a rugged, troubled way, but his life was marked by addiction, legal troubles, and family tragedy. His sister Cheyenne later died by suicide. Christian died in 2008 from pneumonia, a life that promised so much, but delivered mostly pain. His story is a reminder that Hollywood good looks don't guarantee a Hollywood ending. Number 22. Joran van der Sloot. Joran van der Sloot was a Dutch teenager vacationing in Aruba in 2005 when American student Natalie Holloway disappeared. Van der Sloot was the last person seen with her, and his clean-cut, boy-next-door appearance made the case even more gripping. He was never charged in her disappearance, but he remained the prime suspect. In 2010, exactly 5 years later, he killed Stephanie Flores in Peru and was sentenced to 28 years. Van der Sloot showed that sometimes the handsome face on TV isn't innocent, just good at hiding guilt. He recently confessed to killing Holloway as part of a plea deal in a separate case. Number 23. Luca Magnotta. Luca Magnotta was a Canadian who craved fame, working as a model and escort before committing one of the most disturbing crimes in recent history. In 2012, he killed and dismembered a student, filming the act and posting it online. He was handsome, vain, and desperately wanted attention, which he got in the worst possible way. Magnotta was arrested after an international manhunt and sentenced to life in prison. He used his looks to build an online presence, but ultimately his narcissism and violence destroyed any chance at the fame he craved. His story is a dark reminder that social media and mental illness can be a deadly combination. Number 24. Nathan Leopold. In 1924, Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb, two wealthy, intelligent, and handsome University of Chicago students, committed what they called the perfect murder. They kidnapped and killed 14-year-old Bobby Franks just to prove they could. Leopold was particularly striking, with sharp features and an air of intellectual superiority. The case shocked the nation. How could two young men with everything going for them commit such a senseless crime? They were sentenced to life in prison. Leopold served 33 years before being paroled in 1958. He died in 1971. The case inspired numerous books and films, cementing Leopold and Loeb as examples of how privilege, intelligence, and good looks don't equal morality. Number 25. Michael Alig. Michael Alig was the king of New York's club kid scene in the 1990s, a handsome promoter who threw the wildest parties and lived a life of excess. But in 1996, he murdered drug dealer Andre Angel Melendez, dismembered the body, and dumped it in the Hudson River. His crime ended the club kid era and landed him in prison for 17 years. Macaulay Culkin played him in Party Monster, immortalizing Alig's rise and fall. He was released in 2014, but struggled with addiction and died of an overdose in 2020. Michael Alig's story is a cautionary tale about fame, drugs, and how quickly a beautiful life can turn ugly. His good looks and creativity couldn't save him from himself. Number 26. Scott Peterson. Scott Peterson had it all: handsome face, beautiful wife, baby on the way. But on Christmas Eve 2002, his pregnant wife Lacey disappeared. Scott played the worried husband on TV, but investigators weren't convinced. His affair with another woman and his cold demeanor made him the prime suspect. Lacey's body and her unborn son washed ashore months later. Scott was convicted of their murders in 2004 and sentenced to death, though it was later reduced to life in prison. His good looks and seemingly perfect life made the case even more shocking. Scott Peterson proved that monsters can look like the guy next door, and that the perfect smile can hide the darkest secrets. Number 27. Lyle Menendez. Lyle Menendez was the older, more confident brother in one of America's most shocking family murders. Handsome, wealthy, and living in a Beverly Hills mansion, he looked like he'd stepped out of a country club catalog. In 1989, he and his brother Eric shotgunned their parents to death while they watched TV, then went on a spending spree that would make a lottery winner blush. During the trials in the early 90s, Lyle became a media sensation. His slicked-back hair and designer suits made him look more like a young executive than a patricide defendant. Women sent him love letters. He had groupies, because apparently, murdering your parents isn't a deal-breaker for some people. Number 28. Richard Chase. Richard Chase was a serial killer who terrorized Sacramento in the 1970s, earning the nickname the Vampire of Sacramento for his disturbing crimes. His mugshot shows a gaunt but strikingly handsome young man with hollow eyes. He suffered from severe mental illness and believed he needed to drink blood to survive. He killed 6 people in 1 month before being captured. Chase was sentenced to death, but died by suicide in prison in 1980. His case is a reminder that mental illness and violence can wear a handsome face, and that some crimes are too disturbing to romanticize, no matter what the perpetrator looks like. Number 29. Gary Gilmore. Gary Gilmore was a handsome drifter who murdered 2 men in Utah in 1976. But what made him famous wasn't just his crimes, it was his insistence on being executed. He refused appeals and demanded the state carry out his death sentence, making him the first person executed in the U.S. after the death penalty was reinstated. His story inspired Norman Mailer's The Executioner's Song and numerous other works. Gilmore was executed by firing squad in 1977, and his last words were, "Let's do it," which later inspired Nike's "Just Do It" slogan. His good looks and defiant attitude made him a dark folk hero, proof that America has always been fascinated by handsome outlaws, even when they want to die. Number 30. Charles Manson. Before the swastika and the wild beard, young Charles Manson was actually decent looking. Photos from the 1950s and early 60s show a skinny kid with dark eyes and sharp features. He used his charisma and magnetic personality to build a cult that committed some of the most notorious murders in American history. By 1969, when his followers killed 7 people, including actress Sharon Tate, Manson had transformed into the wild-eyed monster we remember. But his earlier photos remind us that he once looked normal, even attractive, His ability to manipulate and charm was his most dangerous weapon. Manson died in prison in 2017, but his name remains synonymous with evil. These 30 criminals prove that a handsome face is no indicator of a good heart. From mob bosses to serial killers, from con artists to cult leaders, good looks have been used as weapons, shields, and ultimately, distractions from terrible crimes. The hot criminal phenomenon isn't new. It's been around as long as crime itself. We've just got social media now to make it weird and immediate. So the next time you see a viral mugshot or find yourself attracted to a true crime documentary subject, remember, looks fade, but murder charges are forever. And no amount of bone structure makes up for being a terrible human being. Stay safe out there, and maybe raise your standards a little.